talk about Jesus. Can I get some love on the radio? I know it's not easy, but Mr. DJ, please, I gotta let the world know. I just wanna help you loving it. Wanna make you smile, change the way you live, and talk about Jesus. So can I get some love on the radio? Let's go.
Hey, it's Dara, and welcome to Gwen's Daughter Podcast. I'm Dara, the host, and I'm welcoming you to my show. I'm super excited about this podcast and this project as a whole. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in. I'm super excited about the episodes and the things that you're going to hear on my podcast. So this episode is going to be a short one. I'm just going to give you guys an overview of what the podcast is about and why I created it. So first, let's start with the name. I decided to call this podcast Gwen's Daughter because my mother's name was Gwen and I'm her daughter, and I'm doing this in her honor because I loved her so much and I feel like that I look like her, I act like her, I have her mannerisms, so what better way than to remember her than to have a podcast named after her. So that's where I got the name for the podcast. And the idea and the passion to have this podcast came about to just give some positivity and some encouragement to the next generation that's coming up behind me. They're also included in the so-called millennials, and I discovered that they don't really have a lot of people to look up to as role models and just have general positivity about things that are going on in their life and positive role models to look up to of what success and what happy and positive living really looks like. So I wanted to create the podcast to talk about those things from people that I know and from myself who have created a lifestyle and have been blessed to live successful and comfortable lives, so that the young generation can know that it is possible for them to be successful in their own lives and live comfortably too. I also created the podcast to give the next generation some tips about how to be successful in different areas of their lives, whether it be in school, whether it be in their artistry or in their careers that they choose, whatever it may be. Just give them some helpful tips that my friends and I have gone through, that we've experienced, that older people have experienced, who've been adulting way longer than I have, who I look up to just give them some tips that they can hold on to and that they can apply to their lives. The podcast was also created for my peers and myself because adulting is hard. It's hard. I wish I could be a kid again. Can somebody please rewind time back? I remember being a kid and wishing I was an adult. I don't wish that anymore. I want my childhood back. It's difficult, it's hard, and I'm learning new things every day. And every day something changes that makes adulting just a little bit harder. So I created this podcast for my peers and I to talk about our experiences and vent, and just have other people who have been through it to give each other advice so that we don't feel like we're crazy or we're losing it or we're doing something wrong, because we're definitely not. And the podcast is also created to talk about everything else in general. That includes pop culture, things in the news, anything that comes to my mind or my friends' minds or your mind that you want to talk about. We're going to talk about it on this podcast. We're going to have a great time. We want to have fun. We want to talk about serious topics. We want to talk about funny topics. We want to mix them together, but we want to have a good time. And that is my goal for this podcast. So I'm also going to give you a layout of what the podcast will kind of sound like. There will be changes that will happen along the way as I add things or I just overall improve things in the podcast. This is my first time doing these things, so I'm taking tips and ideas from other podcasts that I listen to and things that I really like. So bear with me as I get started. If you have any suggestions, I'm open. Please let me know. So the overall order of the podcast is going to be introduction. So you'll probably hear a song that I really like and enjoy. It's probably going to be an upbeat, fast fun song that you can dance to. You can hear a part of that as an intro. Then we'll have a spotlight segment, and in the spotlight segment, we'll have be highlighting accomplishments or achievements or special milestones from some individual in my life, or that I've seen on social media, or that I've seen in the news, or from you guys on what they're doing in their lives, what they have accomplished. And if you know someone who has accomplished something, or you want to have them shout out on the spotlight segment of my show, then you can email me at gwensdaughter86@gmail.com and just submit their name and a little brief summary of their achievement, and they might be featured on an episode of my show. And the second segment of the show will be interesting news. I decided to call it that because some news is not interesting. It's boring. I don't really want to read about the weather or politics all the time. So I'll be pulling some things that I find interesting to report back to you guys. It may be something very small, it may be something very big, but if I find it interesting, then we'll talk about it. And the third segment of the show is going to be the topic segment. In the topic segment, we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about everything. One of our episodes that's coming up, we're going to talk about dating and relationships in 2017. We're going to talk about stress and anxiety. We're going to talk about what it means to go to college in 2017. Is college for me? These are some topics that we might talk about, but anything is possible. And in the topic section, I will either be discussing the topic alone, or I will have special guests come see me in the studio, and we'll talk about different things that come up. And of course, at the end of the show, I will always have a quote of the day, and the quote of the day will be anything. It might have been something that inspired me, or something that I saw on social media, or something that may have been the most inspiring quote of the week or the month. I don't know, but it's going to be the quote of the day, and that is how I will leave you guys at every episode. And also, I will update you with any announcements that I have regarding the podcast, or anything that I feel like you guys need to know. So yeah, that's the overview of the show. I hope you guys listen. Thank you so much for being supportive already. You're doing great. I'm doing great. I'm excited. Thanks again. See you on episode 1.